After my divorce, I felt adrift in a sea of emptiness. Rachel had been my world for over a decade, and without her, the days stretched endlessly with nothing to fill the void. Work was a temporary escape, but as soon as I walked back through the door of my stark apartment, the loneliness crashed over me again. That's when I discovered Omegle, a website to video chat randomly with strangers around the world. At first, it was just a distraction, laughing at the weird people who would pop up on my screen. But then I met Emily. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with long chestnut hair and piercing green eyes. More importantly, she was warm and engaging, with an easy sense of humor that drew me in instantly. "So what's a nice guy like you doing talking to strange women online?" she teased me when I mentioned my divorce. I felt myself blush, an unfamiliar sensation. "Just looking to make new connections, I suppose." "Well, you've come to the right place." Emily flashed a mischievous smile. "I'm a very good connection." We spent hours talking and joking around, the time melting away. When we finally said goodbye, my cheeks literally hurt from smiling so much. I felt alive again for the first time in longer than I could remember. We started video chatting every night after that. I looked forward to seeing Emily's face, hearing her tinkling laugh. She shared just enough about her life to intrigue me, leaving me desperate to know more about this captivating woman. After a couple of weeks, she was the one who suggested we meet up in person at a coffee shop downtown. "If you think you can handle me in the real world," she said with a wink. The day finally arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves mixed with elated anticipation. I got to the coffee shop 20 minutes early and waited impatiently. When 3:15 hit, I checked my phone, but there were no missed messages from Emily. 3:30 came and went. My coffee grew cold as unease crept in. Then, at 3:43, a new text arrived, just 2 unsettling words. "Behind you." I spun around, but the cafe was empty except for the bored barista. A screenshot loaded on my phone. It was me sitting alone, taken from across the street. Ice flooded my veins as I looked around wildly, but I couldn't pinpoint where the photo had come from. My phone buzzed again. "You really should be more careful who you invite into your life, Michael." I leapt up, looking wildly around the empty cafe, then dashed outside, my heart thundering. But there was no one except the usual downtown pedestrians wandering past. Shaking, I typed back a response with trembling fingers. "Who is this? What do you want?" 3 menacing words flashed onto my screen. "Isn't it obvious?" I hurried home, locking the door and drawing all the blinds, suddenly feeling horribly unsafe even in my own apartment. I tried to reassure myself. This was just a cruel prank. But something made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My phone pinged again, and I flinched. "Don't worry. You'll be seeing me again very soon. I can't wait to finally meet you for real this time." I stared at the message, icy tendrils of terror wrapping around my heart. I wanted to dismiss it, to call the police, to do something. But I was utterly paralyzed, desperately hoping this was nothing more than a twisted joke, while knowing deep down that my life would never be the same. This is something that happened in the last apartment that I lived in. I moved into it in June of 2021 and lived there for 2 years before moving. After I had lived there for about a year, I had a new neighbor move in next door. For some details on the apartment building, it's relatively new and was built, I believe, less than 10 years ago. I lived on the 2nd floor and was the right before last unit on one end of it. The building has just straight hallways with units on both sides. My apartment had 1 bedroom, 1 and 1/2 bathrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. The new neighbor got the very last unit on the end. In my time living there, most of the other neighbors were very friendly. I got to know almost everyone who lived on my floor. The person who previously lived next to me was very nice, and we would talk sometimes. A man moved in who didn't seem to be quite as friendly. I just talked to him once shortly after he moved in. I didn't really see him much after that at all, though.
Maybe like once or twice, but I can't specifically think of a time that I did. Probably like 6 months after the new neighbor guy moved. In the next door, I was up sort of late one night. I heard some pounding on the wall coming from his side. It wasn't that loud because the wall seemed to do well with holding sound, but I did hear it. I figured maybe he was hanging something on the wall and didn't pay it much thought. However, probably the next night, I was actually woken up hearing it again. It was a little bit louder this time, but I'm also a light sleeper. I tried to just go back to bed, and eventually, I did. The very next night, though, I was woken up again. This time, in the middle of the night, I woke up to some sounds coming from my bathroom area. The bathroom is connected to my bedroom, and the door leading to it was mostly closed. All of the lights were out, so when I looked around, I couldn't see anything. I was sitting up in bed, trying to figure out what it was that I was hearing. I was also a little bit confused from having just woken up, but then I realized what I was hearing. Somebody was in my bathroom. How they got in, I had no clue. I was sure that I had locked my doors. Then I started to hear footsteps. I jumped up from my bed and only grabbed my phone, then on the way out grabbed my keys and ran completely out of my apartment. I kept running down the hallway and went down the stairs. When I had made it all the way out to my car, I called my best friend. Thankfully, she was actually still awake. It was like 1 in the morning. She let me come over and stay at her place for the rest of the night. The next day, we went back to my place. We carefully looked around, and I was expecting the worst. I thought maybe it would be all messed up and a bunch of my items stolen, but surprisingly everything appeared to be in place. Nobody was inside the apartment at all and nothing was stolen. I was so confused because I was sure that I had heard somebody in there the night before. My friend asked me about everything that happened. As I was telling her, I walked into my bathroom to where I heard the noise. I'm sending an actual picture of my bathroom, so that you can see and get an idea as to what it looked like. To describe where I heard the sounds, I realized it was near my shower. Next to my shower to the right is a very large storage cabinet, or maybe you would even call it a closet. I didn't use it much at all. I just stored extra towels and blankets in there. That's kind of where I heard the noises and I opened it up. When I did, I saw that some things in there were actually a little bit out of place. Then I moved a towel and saw that the wall had a significant crack in it. At least that's what I thought it was. I hadn't remembered it looking at all like that before. On the other side of the wall was my neighbor, the new guy. That's when I realized that he might have been the one in my apartment. I moved the crack a little and realized that a big chunk of the wall could be removed. Horrified, I moved away from there, and my friend and I left. We called the police and apartment management. They did an investigation, and the guy later admitted to creating a hole in the wall and entering my place. He never said what his intentions were, though. I'm glad that I didn't have to deal with him for the last few months that I lived there, but I ended up moving when my lease was up. I just couldn't live there anymore after what had happened. I'm also really glad that I heard the sound when I did, and was able to leave my apartment so fast. I'm going to tell you a horrifying story of my next-door neighbor. I used to have. I live in a single-family home with my wife and our dog Sparky in a residential neighborhood. There are quite a few different houses on our street, and we have 1 acre of land as do most of the neighbors. We've lived here for 5 years now, ever since getting married. Our next-door neighbor had been quite a jerk since the day he moved in. He had been nothing short of a nightmare. He started living next door to us about a year after we moved in. His name was Dan, and I know that he was recently divorced. I understand that can be hard, and it's okay to be going through a difficult time, but that was no excuse for his behavior. I'm only guessing that that's what caused him to act the way that he did. To give some examples, I would say most houses on our street are pretty nice and well maintained. They're not all that large, but the grass is green and mowed frequently. Most people also have nice landscaping and flowers and such. The first time I talked to Dan, he insulted our flowers, saying that we should replace them all because they looked bad. He also made bad comments about my car, a Ford Fusion, saying that it was terrible. He wasn't joking either, like my wife thought he was when I told her about it. She soon found out for herself when she was outside in the backyard once. She said that he told her our house was the ugliest on the block. When I went outside after, I saw him standing in his backyard, seemingly drunk, telling me to F off. After these first few interactions, I tried to stay away from Dan. The next time I talked to him was like a month later, when he came over to tell us that we needed to keep our dog inside at all times. We would sometimes have Sparky out in the front or backyard on a leash. The leash would be attached to a stake in the ground. We did not have a fence around our property at all, but Sparky's leash was not nearly long enough to even come close to reaching past the property line. Dan claimed that he hated dogs and did not want to have to see it in our front yard. I basically took my turn and told him to F off. He angrily walked away, and after that, we didn't interact. But he still made his presence known. He would start leaving his stuff on our property. There were no fences, but there were pretty obvious property lines. Anybody with common sense will be able to tell where it changed from our yard to Dan's. He put his old canoe in the backyard, almost completely on our property.